Hey guys, guess what? Full panel. Look at this. Look at this. Today we have Osama, Val, and Jim Massa from Science Talk with Jim Massa. Oh my gosh. First time here. I'm so excited to have him here because I've been watching his videos. And dudes, if you have not, dude and dudettes, if you have not subbed to his channel, get your butt over there and sub to his channel because he is good. I mean, we can't get enough of this information. If you're like me, I just want more and more and more and more information. And I've been really impressed with his channel. So I invited him to come on and kind of be a part of this network that we're building. Um, and we've got more to come on this network thing. Just wait. We're going to get it together. We'll have a 24-hour climate network, environmental network. So just wait. We're working on it. More to
And
come.
science the shit out of this.
No kidding.
The Martian.
Right. So first of all, oh my gosh, OPEX Tricks is a new viewer. Thank you for coming. I am so excited that we have new people. I love to see new people. Moose Gal, thank you so much for coming. Ashiva, Pat the Batman fan. Oh, I haven't seen you forever. Where have you been, dude? Really, where have you been?
Been a day, man.
I know. I miss Pat Batman fan. Um, let's see. I know there's more people. There's way more people. You guys just been chatting. Keith Boyd, hello, hello. Let's see. Of course, Tanya, hello, Tanya. Ben Wilbur. Let's
Did you
see.
say yes, Shiva?
Anita. Yes, Ashiva. Yes, of course, Ashiva. One of my favorite people. Love Ashiva. Let's see. Okay. Oh, by the way, Pat the Batman fan, I made you a moderator as well. You get a wrench because you can post links now. Don't abuse that privilege, but yeah. Let's
It's
see.
a
Okay,
privilege,
so
not a right.
exactly. Exactly. All right. Smoking. All right, Ben. Anyway, so first off, I want to say that I don't know what the hell's going on with YouTube. I'm not getting notifications for the shows that I watch. When I do get a notification, I go and watch that show. And on my phone, today I watched or listen to, mostly I listen to while I drive, and then I try to like it when I'm done. And I had no option to like. I don't know if I'm the only one who had this issue, but it's crazy. Or the notifications. I know my views have dropped so much. My subscriptions are higher, but my views are way lower. So there's problems with that. And Osama, I know you wanted to um, talk about that a little bit as well.
Yeah, Kevin's been noticing the same thing. More subs, less views. They seem to go up and then they cap and they kind of sit there, where he normally would be
And then
getting.
they'll go down, and then
and
they'll
then
go up, and then they'll.
Yeah, it's very strange. YouTube, I don't think very very much cares for me. I mean, my channel name is Osama number 5. I mean, I'm surprised I've made it since 2015 and I'm still here. I haven't had any copyright strikes or any strikes, and I'm not. I don't watch my mouth. When I'm in
Oh, I don't
chats,
either.
it's like. But as of the 10th of December, they're updating their terms of service agreement to say they can just delete your channel if you're not making them enough ad revenue or enough money by some means. So, I think I'm certainly going to be the first to disappear because, I use an ad blocker. I give them nothing. And I've got 120 subscribers, and all of my content is very, very conspiratorial and, irreverent, I guess you could say. I came up with this Osama thing just because
It was a joke.
it was a
joke.
no, it was a way of like coping mechanism after all of the lies of the Bush administration, and Rumsfeld getting on the TV with this underground cave complex. I'm like, I'm that dude. I'm in the underground cave complex. I've got a burrow to carry my dialysis machine, and I've got 12 wives. One of them's Jewish. And, I've got a microbrewery and an espresso bar, and
Nice.
it's all carbon neutral.
Okay, all right, not to get off topic or go down another rabbit hole, but that new leader that they just killed, that already has been
For
killed like
the
2
fifth time. Yeah,
Big
Baghdadi.
Daddy.
Baghdadi, yeah.
Big bad Baghdadi.
just
Well, he's obviously a cat, right?
oh, Paul's here.
He's been killed like 4 or 5 times now, so he's got 4 to go.
Right. Oh my gosh. Paul is
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna send him.
Yay, Paul.
I'm gonna
Hey,
send
Paul.
him a link in case he wants to jump in because we all love Paul. But
We
before we
love
get
Paul.
too far, please, Jim, will you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and your new channel, Science Talk with Jim Massa, that I love. Just you explained a little bit before, but I want you to tell everyone who you are.
Well, I live here in Fairbanks, Alaska. Been here for over 30 years now. Originally a New Hampshire kid, but I'm an oceanographer. What I actually studied was fluid dynamics, tidal advection affecting chum, salmon, fry, food forage fuel. That was my graduate thesis. But I got working with an institution on the campus of University of Alaska Fairbanks, studying climate change, specifically in the Arctic, and became involved with sea ice researchers. So looking at the oceanography, looking at the surface currents in the Arctic, looking at the sea ice. When does the sea ice form? When does it melt? How thick? What's the southern extent? And part of what our research team found out was, and I've got a video on this, is talking about the Arctic dipole, which is a new phenomenon that we helped without data, and then the atmospheric folks figured it out when identified it. But there's now a new oscillatory system called the Arctic dipole, which the short of it is it helps govern whether sea ice gets pushed out through the Fram Strait on the Atlantic side, or if the sea ice stays within the Arctic Ocean basin. Couple that with the Arctic oscillation.
Would you say the sea ice is like circulating?
That's correct.
And so this kind of dipole that they just kind of realized.
Well, the dipole is basically high and low pressure systems that are found like centered off of Baffin Island and over on the Siberia side. And
so if it pushes,
they're atmospheric phenomenon.
So if it pushes the sea ice out, that's kind of bad.
Yes, it is.
Sea ice in the pole.
Yes, it is. And the sea ice is going to float on the whatever the surface currents are. In fact, that was part of the reason why it's called the Fram Strait is because back in the 1880s, the Norwegian Nansen let the Fram be frozen into the sea ice, and they were tracking its movements. And there's right now currently a expedition kind of recreating what the Fram did all those decades ago, and looking at various things that they're doing right now. So when you look at how the sea ice is moving around, that's going to determine, along with the Arctic oscillation, the North Atlantic oscillation, that's going to affect what people in mid latitudes might be experiencing. In fact, people say, well, we're freezing our asses off down here, so this global warming thing is all pile of horseshit. Well, what's happening is the Arctic is warming up at the fastest anywhere on the planet. It's the fastest warming region on the planet. So what now happens is the temperature, and what follows temperature is pressure, the temperature and pressure gradient are far less. So when you have the jet stream, instead of the jet stream staying what we call a zonal circulation, which is basically following lines of latitude, it's now like becoming meridional. So it's following lines of longitude. So now it dips down, and it's also moving slower. And so it brings the cooler air to lower latitudes.
And more extreme. Tanya wants to know what your prediction is for a blue ocean event. That's kind of a standard question.
Well, I'm gonna throw a wobbler out here, and you guys are gonna probably be surprised at this one. I'm actually one of those oceanographers who is of the opinion that global warming will eventually, not immediately, but centuries down the line, bring on an ice age. And the reason why I state that is when you're melting all the ice in Greenland, you're adding a freshwater lens to the surface of the North Atlantic, specifically a region we call the Jin Sea, Greenland, Icelandic, Norwegian Sea, which is where the what's called the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturn Circulation, takes place, which is the start of what is colloquially called the conveyor belt. And the conveyor belt is a heat transfer mechanism for the planet. It, basically there's a return, you form what's called deep water, so the water sinks vertically and starts to return from the North Atlantic down to the South Atlantic. And what this does is it brings, the cold polar temperatures to the equator, and then the warm, due to the Gulf Stream, brings warm temperatures to northern latitude, which is why Scandinavia and the UK aren't colder than they should be for those latitudes.
So do you think there's not going to be a blue ocean event? Sorry, I don't mean to back you up, but you got to deal with that
I
on
really
the level of
can you give me what you mean by the blue ocean event? I mean, I just
less than 1 million square kilometers of ice.
yes.
Oh, that's what you're referring to. That's going to be happening. I mean, that's going to be happening. In fact, the Chukchi, this past, and still not frozen over. At this time of year, the Chukchi Sea is usually frozen over. There's still open water in the Chukchi and the Barents. So yes, we're headed that way for sure. But going back to what I was saying, just to set it up, as I said, it's going to be centuries down the line because of lag effects and the specific heat of water and so forth. It takes a while for the thermal inertia to be dissipated. But what's happening is seawater density is determined by temperature and salt content, what we call salinity. If you're adding fresh water, that water is no longer as dense, it's not going to sink. So what happens is you shut down AMOC, you shut down this conveyor belt, you shut down the heat distribution mechanism. And the shutdown.
I don't need to keep button in or whatever, but I just want to make sure people understand it because not everybody here is scientists. So you're saying more fresh water is added to the salt water, which is,
on the surface, that's correct.
Right. So it will freeze easier because it doesn't have the salt in it. Am I getting this wrong, or
right?
Is that
because
what
when the
saying?
when the Gulf Stream is flowing north, it flows into and becomes actually called the polar drift or the northward drift, and that's in the region around Iceland, Norway, Greenland, in that area up there. It gives off its heat because it's warm water coming from the Gulf of Mexico. It gives off its heat, so now the water is cold. It was already very salty to begin with, so it's extremely dense and it sinks. Throw some fresh water on the surface, it's not as dense, it's not going to sink as readily. The conveyor belt shuts down. And by the way, some researchers from Norway have already been measuring a slowdown in the deep water formation, as has a team from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Halifax, Dartmouth, the Twin City there in Nova Scotia.
Can you
so it's already slowing down.
so you can answer questions? Because you're gonna get. I know you haven't been live before, so this is a new thing. But people are in the chat talking, and a lot of them will have questions, and they're gonna want to know, about the albedo effect and all that when you're talking about it more, going back into an ice age. We're kind of confused because of the albedo effect and being
albedo is simply, I'll give you an example of how the albedo is happening right here in northern latitudes, polar latitudes. Albedo is simply sunlight energy reflecting off basically ice or snow surface.
Right,
so that
light colored surface where
right, so that
absorb it.
Will absorb it. That's correct. So if you have sea ice, if you have glaciers, the sunlight energy bounces off of that back into space. Planet, stays cool, or at least that region stays cool. If you got open water like we're having here, that energy is now absorbed. which
Which
leads
will
to
warm
further
the
warming.
ocean. So I'm still confused at why it's going to get colder, but
I have two questions
okay, go
for
ahead.
Jim.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Osama.
So the lens of fresh water, mostly coming off Greenland, is it's freezing, so it's a thin layer of ice. It shows up as larger ice extent, but the volume is way down. So the graphs are showing pretty much record lows across the board, but even still, I think they're elevated from what they are. The other thing I wanted to mention is the other half of the equation. When that polar vortex, or when the jet stream piles up on itself, comes down across the middle of the country, or comes down across the eastern half of the country, there's your side, Jim, where the Pacific is so warm below Alaska, and that's what gets funneled back up into the Arctic, which causes more warming. Is that right?
Well, what you're seeing is, don't forget, there are a couple of concepts. One is called conservation of volume. If you got whether it's an air mass or a water mass moving into an area, something has to leave that area. So if I've got warmer air moving into a region that's normally cooler, well, that cool air has to go somewhere. So you have this shifting of warm and cold air masses moving around. One thing I want to mention, because this is people aren't always aware of this, when oceanic water freezes, the sea ice has no salt in it. It's a thing called brine rejection. So you can literally go up to sea ice, take a chunk out of it, melt it, and drink it. There's no salt in it. So a lot of people are not aware of that. But also because of the salt, there's a thing called freezing point depression, which means that you lower the temperature at which the water begins to freeze. And then when you start doing that, that's when you kick out the salt as part of the matrix and the basic structure of things. And you get these little brine rejects, and you get these little vertical movements of water due to the salt actually increasing the surrounding salinity. But the sea ice itself is basically salt free.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay,
that changes.
here's one of the problems with the science, and the climate scientists have failed to communicate to the general public.
Ashiva has a great question when you're done.
Okay, go ahead. Well, go ahead. I'll finish that up later.
She's asked this before, but I didn't know how. I don't know. I have no clue. Ashiva asks, Jim, if dumping massive amounts of the world's salt from Utah and the Himalayas into the brine pools in Antarctica will cause the ocean wave conveyor belt to make more waves and keep things cool. Not sure if I read that correctly, but did you see that comment?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question fully, because I mean, if
what effect would it have to dump like the salt from like the Great Salt Lake? There's tons of salt. I
mean, we have to look at what the amount is. You have to look at mixing rates. You have to look at the overall volume of the water. I mean, it's probably not going to do much to be because the conveyor belt is what we call a deep water flow. It will the conveyor belt sinks down to about 1,000 meters, give or take, and it starts flowing southward, and then it branches off into the Indian Pacific. It just branches off, and eventually it will surface, because as the water is flowing, it's interacting with other water masses. That's imparting what's called a little bit of heat due to friction. Friction warms things up. It starts to rise. Now, here's the thing, though, and I'm kind of jumping here a bit, but there's a place in the Southern Ocean called the Antarctic Divergence Zone. And this is, of all the open oceanic waters on the planet, this is the most productive. And why is that? Because part of that conveyor belt surfaces what we call an upwelling, and it brings nutrients with it. Phytoplanktons go to town, the krill go to town, et cetera, et cetera. You shut down the conveyor belt, you kill that ecosystem. But the lag effect is centuries down the line because of thermal inertia. even though the conveyor belt itself can shut down in a matter of decades. But there's always a lag effect. But as far as adding salt, no, I don't think it's really going to do much. And the conveyor belt is more of a deep water flow with upwellings at various locations in the oceanic realm of things.
Wow, so much information.
Well, that's exactly the problem, is that the climate scientists have basically failed to communicate with the public. So you have a large amount of public who believe climate change deniers because the answers are a bit more simplistic, easier,
Yeah,
to
the sun controls everything, for
And
one, or it's a natural process.
right,
For two. There's those two.
It's much more simplistic, where you have these complex interactions in the ocean, and he mentioned probably about 20 or 30. And so the hard thing to do is to kind of break it down or simplify it for the stupid people, the average people.
Can you all see the comments at all? Anyone?
I can see some of them.
Well, that's actually what I'm trying to do with my channel, is try to break things down into a way that
laymen
non-scientists can get it. I don't know if I'm always successful, but that's what I'm aiming to do.
I understand when I'm watching your channel. I've only been able to watch a few, and I haven't been notified. But when I got your notification today, both me and Sandy both did. It was like, yay! That was pretty cool.
That's why I made that joke. If I must have been a slow news day, but but actually, you do have a fair critique there that scientists, haven't always disseminated. Let's face it, we're so damn busy doing the science and writing. But you know what? We're also so damn busy writing proposals to a bunch of yahoos in Congress to try and get them to fund us. So there's an inherent problem with the system there.
That's one of the
that's a tricky one too, right, Val?
Because the problem is that deniers say that you guys are always trying to get money.
So you'll lie.
Yeah, you know what I say to that? And you know what I say to that? Why don't they call out the people who work for the oil companies, who make hell of a lot more money than we do, for what the crap that they put out? I mean, people, we're in it for the money. Do you know that most of us are making 5-digit salary before the decimal point? We're not making 6-figure salaries here. So if we're in it for the money, well, then we're in the wrong damn field.
now we aren't saying that here. We're just.
I know, but I just get sick of hearing that, is because I just want to go up to them and just slap them and say, "You're full of it."
Well,
why don't you call out? Why don't we? I know. Why don't they call out those people who work for the oil companies to spread bullshit?
I don't.
Who's going to call them out?
They don't call them out. That's the hypocrisy.
That's their tactics. They aren't going to do that.
And Tina says you're very succinct.
They own the media.
I'm a New Englander. We're not known for diplomacy. We're rather blunt.
and rightly so. And that's why you guys need to debate. Unfortunately, like the recent Potholer and Tony Heller debate. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Tony Heller. He's one of the top YouTube
one of
deniers. And Potholer basically tore him a new asshole.
Good for Potholer.
But unfortunately,
guy's on the money.
But unfortunately,
Andre's here. Hello, Andre.
But that's the other problem. There's tons of deniers online on YouTube. There's only about 4 or 5 scientists who do regular videos on YouTube, such as Potholer, Thunderfoot. Are you familiar with D.A. Strong, Dark Strong? He's a retired climate scientist, ex-NASA. So there's only a handful. That's it.
Yeah. Well, that list of 100 scientists that were denying the global warming were not scientists. I mean, at the very least, they weren't climate scientists. They were.
you have a lopsided battle.
And then
Okay,
there's 11,000. Okay, there's some people saying that that was debunked, and please tell me if someone has any evidence
well,
that that was debunked about the 11,000 scientists um, endorsing the
what
report
they
in Bioscience.
right, what they did, well, they also, I'm not even sure if they made this up, but they also put in like Mickey Mouse, and I think they added that in the climate change deniers to their audience, to their choir, saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, this is all a big joke because look who signed it, Mickey Mouse."
So one of them signed it,
Well,
like as Mickey Mouse.
I think so. So you
Well, there
have
could
to.
be somebody named that.
No, it wasn't. It was.
No,
They
actually, if it was Goofy, I think then we might have a problem.
well, yeah. So
I don't
you
know. So was that actually debunked, Jim? Do you know? Was it debunked, the 11,000 scientists?
No, that's again propaganda crap.
well
The
exactly
scientists one thing the scientists have actually figured out is that they need to be more proactive in disseminating the
right,
information
right,
and not just stay doing our research, cranking out our papers
right.
and the peer-reviewed stuff. They're actually becoming more forthcoming. Well, that's not a good word. They're actually becoming more forceful in the information that's
Right.
being
And not only that,
determined.
Trying
but
not to soften it as much because that's what they've been doing, softening
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's the other
information.
thing. They're being blunt now, and I've actually covered some stories recently where I basically, because I go to the peer-reviewed articles that form the basis for what I report on in my channel, and lately some of the language from the scientists is pretty much right to the point. It's extremely blunt. They're not holding back. No fists, no punches are being pulled. They're just laying it out there and basically saying,
More and more
we got a
are.
problem.
Yeah, every
Yeah.
day.
it's
So,
So,
which is
all
actually
tough
a
love.
good thing to see that basically saying, hey, folks, there's some serious shit going on here.
yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about the Paris Accord. Oh, it would be ideal if we can keep it to under 1.5 degrees C.
Paris
We're already at
Accord is,
1.3.
I
And so
know.
we're gonna blow past that in the next few friggin'
Wasn't there
years.
like 9-year-old information that they were working off to begin with? And then there's the
Well,
built-in.
that's the IPCC,
Yeah.
and do not get me going on the IPCC. Do not. They are really
Oh,
nothing
I
more
want to
than
get you going on that
they are
eventually.
nothing but
I
a
would love it.
political body, and when you look at the IPCC reports, you don't find methane in the damn reports.
Right. They never talk about the methane.
And
And they and
as
they
I
don't
said
talk
at the
about
beginning.
global dimming either. They don't talk about that. So
I mean, and here's the other thing. A lot of people say, well, warmer temperature is great for agriculture. I go, no, it isn't,
no, it's
because
not.
plants are most of the plants, with the exception of corn, all the plants that we grow for agricultural purposes are what's called C3 plant. It's a type of biochemical mechanism that goes on within the cells. But basically, C3 plants do not like temperatures above 85 degrees Fahrenheit in general.
I can attest to that with my garden. I had I had a really hard time, and mostly it was because we had several days above 100, to 105 degrees, and it killed so many plants. Just that.
Yeah.
We
And
had some plants that did okay, did pretty good, but like half of the plants that we planted died because of the
the
heat.
only the only crop that is a C4 plant, which can tolerate warmer temperatures, is corn. But only
Corn
so
did
up to
do
a
well
point.
here.
That's right, up to a point. So what happens is that basically the C3 plants they lose a lot of moisture, transpiration out the stomata. So what's happening is we're now finding that warming planet is causing a kind of a double whammy. It's causing a reduction in crop yields, and the crop that is cultivated, that is harvested, has a lower nutritional value to it. So we're getting less food overall, and the food is a lower quality.
Yeah, and I have to remind everybody that McPherson says it's not just a matter of moving croplands north. The soil has to be correct. You just can't put. In other words, you couldn't move to Antarctica and start planting corn. It won't work. You have
Right.
to
Yeah.
get the right soil.
Right.
I'm
Well,
quoting Guy
And the
McPherson.
soil's being destroyed because it's not in a symbiotic relationship with the animals that live on
well,
it like
see,
it used to be.
there's a reduction in the mineral content as well.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah,
kind
but
of out of
take all the
that's
minerals out.
yeah, that's out of my area of expertise. But
But I would love. I wish I could get you and Torstein on to talk about the ice situation because that would be fantastic. Because he's up in Greenland and he's been
oh,
keeping
cool.
track of the.
Okay, I have a question for him.
Okay.
Here's my question. Um, the Arctic News, the blog that a bunch of people, McPherson, Beckwith, all kinds of people are on our Arctic News. They're estimating that temperatures could go up 10 degrees in 20, 30 years. So my question is, how fast do you think all the cryosphere can melt?
That's
If
very
it
difficult
reaches 10 degrees,
to model. But
well, I'm not
let's
asking
just
you to model. I'm asking you just to guesstimate it.
well to guesstimate, you have to look at what the models are indicating, and you that is extremely difficult to pin down with any what we
Okay,
call
well let's say
confidence or putting any confidence intervals around our
okay,
guesstimates.
well let's just we're just guesstimating here. Let's just say the temperature does go up 10 degrees. Now, is that sufficient to melt the cryosphere? 10 degrees.
C or F?
I would say, I think they were saying C.
Wow, so that would be 18 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right.
If that happens, yeah, that's pretty much a gonzo. I mean,
How long do you think it would take to melt Greenland?
It's melting
Guesstimating.
pretty fast right now. I mean,
well,
it's going.
that's just a part of the other issue is that a lot of the previous modeling would based on a linear increase when it's now actually exponential. So
Right.
it's actually going to go fast.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's going to actually faster and faster. But just to put in, so that's why it's like, oh wow, Greenland's melting a lot faster than we previously estimated or thought. Because see, here's the thing: if I have, say, a kilogram of water, and I want to heat that kilogram of water 1 degree C, it takes about 4 kilojoules of energy to do so. If I have a kilogram of ice and I want to melt it, change its state from solid to liquid, it's going to take about 80 kilojoules of energy. So now, when you're melting Greenland, just think about all the energy that's going into that to take that ice and turn it into liquid. It's a shitload.
Yeah,
To be
it's a
quite
shitload.
blunt about it.
And that's, yeah. Okay,
And
I have another question for you here.
Okay, then we gotta get your
Well,
guys' topics.
okay,
Not,
well,
I mean, I want to welcome Jim Massa here. Thank you so much for coming, and I
I want
want
to
you on any
I want to
Monday
see
you're
what he
available. By the
I
way,
want to see what he
so
thinks about this. World War II had the Manhattan Project. The government wrote a blank check to make an atomic bomb, and that wasn't even an existential threat. That was just so we wouldn't be speaking Japanese, or, it was just a war thing. What do you think the government has a Manhattan level project to find something to slow or stop the warming?
I don't know. If you look at some of the reports that the Pentagon of all places has put out, where they actually are stating that they consider climate change slash global warming to be a national security threat
Right.
slash risk, it makes one wonder. I am not privy to that information, so I can't say.
Well, they got to be, because if it was just for so we wouldn't be speaking German in World War II. They the most top secret program ever, one of the most, not the most. That if the leadership considered that this was a serious, beyond just losing a war, but that the population of the planet could cease to exist, they have to be doing something like this. In my personal view.
Okay, wait,
Well-
wait. This is an important question to answer. I'm sorry to stop y'all. Andre wants to know, how do you know this is not a normal cycle of the planet? You can only see so far back. This planet has existed for 4 billion years.
Oh, thank you for that question. Let me get into that.
Yes, please
Okay.
do. Please do.
The important
Sick 'em, Jen.
the important concept here is the rate of change.
Yep.
That's the important
That's what I
concept.
always see.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, there have been cycles in the planet in the past, but this is the fastest we have records for. It is far faster than anything we see in the past. And by the way, and I did a lengthy video on this, where I discuss isotopic fractionation. I did a lengthy video on this, and basically with the technique of isotopic fractionation, we can, by looking at the isotopes, whether it's O18, O16 ratio, C13, C12, etc., N15, N14 as well, we can actually reconstruct past climates, and we can look at the gas bubbles in the ice cores, etc., etc. Please check out those videos for detailed information.
Yeah, there's lots
But
of videos on that topic, by the way.
And the most important thing, the key is, as you said, was the rate of change.
It's the
Right.
rate of change. It's the fastest that we've got going right now. And we
Faster
can,
than the great dying.
Andre,
Yeah,
you know.
yes, actually it is. It is. It is.
So,
And here's the
okay,
other
be
thing.
nice, Val. Be
When
nice.
we look at
Andre's new to
this,
My
this.
bro.
I know.
when we look
I
at the
love
C-
Andre. I love Andre so much. Sorry.
when we look at the CO2 in the atmosphere, okay, again, looking at the isotopes, we can actually identify the source of every single CO2 molecule, whether it's biogenic or anthropogenic source of it. And when you trace it back to the start of the Industrial Revolution, all the CO2 that's been added into the atmosphere has an anthropogenic signature on it. So anyone says, oh, it's just natural science, bullshit. We have the damn scientific evidence that demonstrates otherwise.
Which has reached the gold standard in science, which is the highest level of science you can get. So you might as well deny gravity exists, correct?
Might as well.
Like,
You know, you might as well, say,
Well,
hey,
there's
gravity.
we used to have an old joke. There is no gravity, Earth sucks, but that's an old joke. It's an old joke, but yeah, it's the rate of change, and so we can identify the source of every CO2 molecule, and so we know that this is what is happening. It's the rate of change is the fastest. And just like when people want to argue Milankovitch, and again, I did a couple of videos on Milankovitch, when you look at the cycles, what we see, Milankovitch only explains about 73% of the variation. The other is due to human activity, because the human, when you start accounting for human activity, then everything lines up as far as what's reflected in the data. And actually, if we were to look at Milankovitch would be predicting the Earth would be entering into a cooling phase right now, not a warming phase.
And that's
It's
what
kind
they're
of a
saying,
double.
but they're wrong. They're not taking into account the anthropogenic CO2.
yeah, well, because the solar. Wait.
That's
Are
correct.
we talking?
That's correct.
I kind of got distracted, but like the solar minimum people, they don't realize that it's
Yeah.
only 0.03% is how much the sun is involved in short
That's correct.
term climate change. But the effect of global warming, human caused global warming, is outweighing that effect. And if you just take time to look at the global temperatures and the changes in those temperatures over time, it's an obvious
See,
exponential increase in global temperature, correct?
Well, when we do, studies and stuff like that, there's a lot of statistics involved, because we're testing for what we call the contribution of whatever parameter it may be to the overall response. So you have a dependent variable. The dependent variable will respond to the input of independent variables. For example, the density of seawater responds to what is this density to the independent variables, which are temperature and salinity. So the independent variables govern the response seen in the dependent variable. So we look at a lot of these things and we measure it, and we then determine, well, this parameter contributes, say, 54% to the variation that we see. This parameter contributes 21% to the response. This variable contributes, et cetera, et cetera. So when people say, oh, you're not considering the sun, yeah, we are. We look at the sun, and basically the conclusion is, from using statistical analyses, is that changes in the solar output is not a significant contributor to the temperature response.
Right.
It's
I mean,
that
if you
simple.
were going into like the sun
Yeah.
was exploding, like, it goes, I don't know, the different stages of stars. If it was going into the bigger, that would make a difference. But that's thousands and thousands and thousands of years
Right.
to make that
Well,
change.
actually,
Where the
millions.
And they
solar
were,
minimum is just a little bit of a adjustment,
It's a
right?
minor variation. Andre was using that word theory, which he was using wrong, but he was
Uh,
basically
yeah.
saying that,
Please,
this is, he's
for
using the colloquial term.
everybody's benefit, please, any
Yeah.
scientist in the room, describe the difference between a scientific theory and a hypothesis, or just a person's theory. Like, it's different.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let's start with a hypothesis. A
Okay.
hypothesis is when we in science we test hypotheses.
Right.
Now, basically, you make a bunch of observations and you say, I wonder, fill in the blank, and you go and set up an experimental design to test the hypothesis. Now, again, we take measurements and we then do statistical tests. Is the HO, the null hypothesis would be that there is no significance, in what we're seeing, or the alternative hypothesis, HA, is, oh, there is a significant hypothesis. And so we run these tests and we say, okay, we either accept HO or we reject HO. Now, I did, again, the scroll way down in my video column there, I did an introductory statistics video. But basically, what we're saying is that something is significant at the 95% level. So what does that mean? Okay, what that means is that the chances that the differences we're seeing in response due to randomness in the system is less than 5%. When we
You
say it's
know,
significant at 95% level. That's
Jim, these people will accept DNA in the courtroom. They'll go, yeah, we accept that. But for some reason, when it comes to climate, they've got to come up with a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. And by the way,
Hello, Mark.
the DAP
But
20, the
But
climate,
see here, okay, I have to forgive me for interrupting you. I have to say something on that right now, because people say, "Oh, you're just modeling, you're making shit up." No,
right.
when the models are created, what we are doing is we work the models so that the predictions of the models, before we project as to what might come down the pike in the future, we work the models so that the models recreate what has already been observed, data. So we keep working the models until the models predict what we have already seen. Once we get to that point, then we say, okay, now we have a good model. Now we can extrapolate out. A lot of people do not understand how that process works.
And that's true.
And I wish more people would understand that. I think that needs to be described almost like at the beginning of every freaking science show. It's like, this is the difference. This is the difference.
Treat it like kindergarten, because there is some confusion with that. And
yeah, explain to me like I'm 5. Like, I love that whole concept. Explain to me like I'm 5.
Scientists also have to choose their words carefully. So, for example, they use the God particle for the Higgs boson, leading people to believe actually that it was something to do with God. Or Einstein used a lot of references to God, such as God didn't play dice with the universe, and Einstein had to clearly say that he wasn't a believer. So sometimes scientists have to, especially when it comes to models, because the deniers tend to use that as a weapon, and so they have to say what you just said to explain how models are used in science, not just climate science, but any science.
Hello,
With,
Unstructured Understanding. He's a new subscriber, or he or she. I'm not sure. I don't know. But thank you so much for subscribing, by the way. And awesome to see you here in the chat. Wait, let me read his her. I don't know if it's him or her. I don't know. Exxon mapped and modeled North American aquifers in the 70s and 80s. Isotope tracing. We do that. Um, please comment on that. That was, yeah, a new subscriber. Thank you so much. So, do you have any comment on that, Jim?
Well, it's like you went, earlier you were asking what's the difference, what a theory means to a scientist and to the other person. Let's take with lawyers when they use theory. It's basically they're just thinking up a scenario for how the crime went down, whatever, which is just pure speculation, no basis in observations, anything like that. When a scientist says theory, well, let's take for example, you mentioned gravity earlier. Okay, we know gravity exists, but what is it? Well, that's gravitational theory to try and explain what gravity is. It's just like evolution. Well, it's just a theory. No, evolution is fact. Evolutionary theory is what's the mechanism by which evolution, the fact, takes place.
Okay.
And we're having a very good handle of that with the evolutionary developmental biology field,
Just
Evo Devo.
perfectly
We're looking at
understood that
gene
evolution
mapping and that kind of stuff.
happens.
Yeah,
I mean, it happens before our freaking eyes. It's not like
exactly.
I never understood people who don't believe in evolution. It's like, do you have eyes? Do you see? I
Well,
don't know.
I'll pass comment on that.
All right, that might be a little cruel, but I just recently had a thing, and I'm like, no, but kind
Yeah,
of been
but
proven over time. There's bones and stuff, and you
see,
can
the thing is,
see that.
in science, as soon as something takes place that refutes a theory, you know what? We scrap the theory or we revise it.
Right. And
and the same
Yeah,
almost nothing goes past the theory stage, right? I mean, it's always a theory until it's disproven. So,
yeah, basically, what science is about, you know, proving, disproving, whatever. And we don't really prove anything. We simply verify, but we can disprove.
right. So, has anyone disproven the
yeah.
creator, the intelligent creator theory?
Well, there's nothing to disprove there because it's not science.
Yeah, science doesn't really. Science
I'm
doesn't
sorry.
really know the
I'm going
I
to be
just had to
blunt here.
bring that up, but
It's not science. It's not based on any observable data. It's just not science.
right.
I think we should also reiterate what the mission is for your channel.
Okay, go
Which
ahead,
is,
Val.
the
We
mission of
kind of
this
got off
channel.
topic.
We don't just talk about science. We also are talking about ways to possibly reverse or stop the processes that the Earth is in now.
If that's
So,
which I don't believe, by the way, I do not believe that's possible at this point. That does not mean I don't want to try and try to convince people to
yeah,
do the right thing.
let me
And
mention something really quick, Chris.
okay,
Guy just did a video with Peter, the psychologist.
yeah, I skimmed through that. I didn't listen to the whole
But
thing.
they used a word, and I thought it was the wrong way to use that word, and that word was surrender.
Yeah, that was a bad word. Don't
That
surrender.
that that
Fight
spells,
like hell till the end. Don't
well, no, but
surrender.
it spells defeat. It says defeat in it,
Yeah,
and I thought a better word would have been acceptance, maybe.
maybe acceptance, but
But
I don't know. I still don't even want to accept it,
I,
even though I know I am accepting it, but I just don't want to just give in to it.
right, and I don't know who picked that word surrender,
I don't know
whether it
either.
was which one, but it was a poor choice of words. Even if you align with Guy and you believe
Which a
that,
lot of people here do.
but that's acceptance. That's not necessarily, to me, the word surrender is equal to defeat. Same.
Okay, wait. Do you want to? Can you see the comments, Jim?
I really can't. I'm not sure
Okay, Andre says
what's going on.
evolution of a fact, however, science and data is based upon human calculation, which is wrong in some areas and not always based on true fact.
Tear him an asshole, Jim. Go for it.
I know.
Do it.
Be nice. I mean, Andre
Explain it again.
Andre's just coming from his true like feelings and stuff. So
Well,
nobody be hard on Andre. I'm serious. We're having
Well,
a real
okay,
conversation.
let's put it this way. Okay, could there be errors in human calculation? Sure. Can there be errors in how the data is collected? Sure. But you know what? Science has corrective measures, and basically, when mistakes are found, it's corrected. So that's one of the things that's great about science, is that we're always looking to
correct it. That's why
improve our
there's
knowledge.
you,
And
peer
improving our
review.
knowledge is not just understanding what's happening better, but also improving how data is collected, how data is measured,
but
and how
I
it,
have to mention this. I have
And
to
peer
mention this.
reviewed. Like
yes,
it has to be
and
peer reviewed. Right.
They
Okay.
and
they really cannot argue with the scientific body. What they try to say is that there's an agenda, that the climate scientists have an agenda, whether it's to raise taxes or to put controls on people. So they try to pick apart
Socialism. That's the
socialism.
one I hear all the time. Socialism.
Argue,
We
they
can't
have
protect the planet because
right,
socialism. And I'm like,
right.
what the fuck are you talking about?
They really
yeah,
have no
like capitalism is such a bang up system.
Yeah, great system there. That's done really great for our homeless veterans. Fuck.
Right?
Like,
they
oh
have
my
no
God.
argument. They
Well,
have no
okay.
argument against the science. So they
Well,
have to
here,
make up things that there's an agenda.
Yeah.
Or
well, we do have an agenda: disseminate the truth.
right. That's the agenda.
Now,
Unless
what
you're paid
again?
by Exxon or the
Right. That's
pharmaceutical
exactly what I was about
companies
to
or
say.
Monsanto, then
You know
you
what?
probably have an agenda. But if you're not paid off
Exactly.
by those people, if you're depending on government grants, you probably don't have much of an agenda. You probably just want to find out facts.
And what I also say to people is exactly what you just said, Chris, is spot on. What I also want to say to people is like, really? So you have scientists from all over the world, from all these different countries, all publishing basically that humans are kind of fucking up the place. And so we're all in on this conspiracy. We all have this agenda.
And you're out for
It's
like a
complete. It doesn't even
$10,000 grant
it doesn't even pass the
fund
sniff test.
your research. You barely live off of that amount, but the the scientists that are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do research for Monsanto and Exxon
Exactly.
and the
Exactly.
pharmaceutical
corporate
companies,
scientists.
they don't have any agenda. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna go on a rant. I'm sorry. I'm done.
Go for it, Chris.
No,
Go for it. Go
that's
for
my
it.
huge rant. It's like, really? The people who are saying you're hurting the fucking planet, they would stop industry. They would stop all this money making. They don't have an agenda. They're not getting paid off by anybody to stop industry. The people who are getting paid off are the people who are trying to allow regular everyday business to keep going. Those are the people that are
Well,
getting
those are the
paid off.
liars.
Monsanto, Exxon, even people are getting paid through the EPA. There's like people who used to work for Monsanto that now work for the EPA or vice versa, and they're all working together. Those people are the ones that have a huge agenda and are making tons and thousands of dollars off their research that's cherry picked and bullshitted, and there's tons of emails to show that that is the fact. So, okay.
And we that was great. That was great. We also got to remember
I'm breathing.
that any scientist who finds an opposite answer to the current climate scientist and can prove it is going to win a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
It is it. That's what you guys do when
Yeah,
you.
but I'm afraid you're going to get someone who's out to make a buck to have a fake answer for it.
But they would have to prove it. That's the whole point. The other scientists would have to repeat their experiments, and if they can't repeat them, then it's nothing.
Yes, yes.
But if they did,
But there's going to be those that go and sell something as something, and then they're going to be like if ExxonMobil, for instance, goes in and hires scientists to do research for them to push a product. Those are the things you got to watch out for. You got to worry about is that kind of thing where they're just trying to make a last minute buck before we all go down in flames. And That's what I'm worried about. I mean, God, Osama,
So,
chip in.
so can I please take that to, yeah, we're kind of preaching
Your
to the
turn.
choir science-wise. The science is pretty much settled,
Yes.
but there's a human
It is.
element that I think that Peter and Guy were touching on. Unfortunately, they were talking about surrender, but you know
Well, it was an unfortunate
that's
turn.
not what I feel he stands for, and he's been very clear on the fact that you know
Just don't be attached to the outcome. Do what you
don't
can.
be
But
yes
be attached to the outcome. Yeah.
try for solutions and be humane. Okay, so if you can in this time of the destruction, the environmental destruction, the species destruction, the habitat destruction, if you can give comfort to an individual or a species and let them be on this planet for a little bit longer, that is a worthwhile human endeavor. Okay, so you know, I mean, we
Save
need
what
to
we
go
can
into
while
our
we can.
hearts,
Yes.
you know, and you know, it's painful, yes, the truth hurts, but the lies are killing us. Okay, and you know, we we don't have the power of these massive corporations, do we? Oh yeah, we do. There's a lot more of us than there are of them. So you know, I totally applaud the people who are getting out on the streets and stopping and inconveniencing and pointing the finger at what the hell is going on, because people are oblivious, and we need to get this message out there in the most effective way possible, if only to prepare people for what is coming. You know, I mean, any little bit helps. You know, I mean, it may be too late. You know, things are in motion. The all the assessments have not taken into account even the known feedbacks and the known, you know, things like what I want to get into about the methane.
Yeah, you need to get into that. But there's also the
You
known
know,
unknowns, like things we don't know.
right? And as Val, you know, to his credit, always says, the black swan
Yeah.
is, you know,
Yeah, we're all
there's
hoping for that.
always a chance. I mean, I see so many beautiful and brilliant young minds.
I'm going to take
mean,
a break and let you guys take over this for a little bit. So
Okay.
Got it.
I'll be listening, but I'm going to take a little break.
All
Well,
right.
let me, if I can just jump in with a
Yes,
couple
please.
Yes.
of points there. You know, how do we get the information out there? Well, I think it's safe to say that we don't rely on the mainstream media, because they won't, because they're owned by corporations and they have a vested interest in not seeing this information get out there.
Glue
To
yourself
the
to
point-
a train.
What's that?
Glue yourself to a train.
Well, yeah, watch out for the brick wall, right? But to your point about the science is settled, yeah, let me give you some statistics, because that's what we do. There have been over 14,000 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. Of those 14,000 plus papers, 37 have basically concluded that there is no climate change / global warming, or if there is, it's not due to human activity. So when you say 37 out of 14,000, that is about as close to a consensus as you're ever going to find. And by the way, a review of those 37 papers, in all of those papers, errors were found in the assumptions, in the calculations, and in the methodology that was undertaken. So yeah, it is about as much as a consensus you're ever going to find in any scientific field.
The problem is they don't make issue of it. They ignore it. They don't bring up the 37 papers and say, hey, these are bad papers. There's flaws in the experimentation. They don't mention anything about it. There was a scientist attached to JPL that made some speculations that Mars was warming, okay, due to some measurements she made, but later they were proved to be wrong. And they've used that same paper over and over. I see this, believe this is what I see all the time. They'll say something like, well, the other planets are warming too, i.e., blaming the sun. I say, how can you possibly know that? We have no sensors on anything but Earth and Mars. So how, it's a bullet point they put out and it's not refuted. Debunked,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. Haven't you ever seen that? People, climate change deniers say that?
Well, here's the here's one. Climate deniers will say, well, CO2 has nothing to do with temperatures because see, the increases in the rates that don't line up. Well, that's because they're not taking into account lag effects. I actually did a video where I debunk the notion that CO2 and temperature are not linked. But they'll glom onto just some little slight misinformation thing and they run with it.
And they use the same bullet points over and over. And a lot of them are debunked. People will just copy, deniers will just copy and paste them, and they'll just put them in comment sections and repeat the same stupid and wrong-headed bullet points over and over. Now, there is one scientist that has a lot of he's a pretty famous scientist, Dyson, Freeman Dyson. You know who Freeman Dyson is?
Oh yeah. I know.
That's probably about the only well-known, well-regarded climate scientist, or he's not a climate scientist, he's a mathematician. And he denies climate change.
Well, yeah, just because you have certain letters after your name doesn't mean you're an expert in everything.
But he's not Freeman Dyson in the PhD.
And also, it doesn't take any letters after your name to be true to the scientific method and carry out research.
Well, this is one area where Freeman Dyson is just wrong.
Val, describe a denier.
And I probably shouldn't have brought it up because that's about the only well-regarded scientist, he's not a climate scientist, who spouts this nonsense off.
Val, describe a denier to Andre.
He's denying reality.
No, a denier in general. I mean, all of you can give feedback on that.
Well, I would call it that
because we probably all have a different view of that.
My definition is that they're denying scientific data, that they say, hey, I don't believe this. I think this is lies because of blah, 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 socialism, taxes. And we believe that there's an agenda and they're making this up. That's what I believe.
My view is people who don't believe it. I'm just going to tell you this real quick, then I'm out again. But I believe a denier is someone who is not looking at peer-reviewed science papers that are pointing to the facts that we are dealing with right now, and just discount it all. That's my view of a denier. Just simple as that. You're not looking at peer-reviewed science. You're just looking at some obscure person who's saying this isn't true and going in that direction. That's
deniers taste better.
Yeah, deniers and the rich taste better.
Well, see, that's the thing is, the deniers, when what's the saying? You are entitled to your opinions, but not your own facts.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So
Daniel Moynihan.
Yeah, that you got that right. And but the thing is, and this goes back to what we touched on earlier, that scientists haven't always done a good job of disseminating.
Welcome, Mitchell. Mitchell is joining the group here. So.
What's going on? So, but how many people really have access to peer-reviewed journals? Those subscriptions are not cheap. So, and they're not, you may be able to go on a website and see a quick, abstract or something, but to get into the details of the methodology and the data and the graphs and that kind of stuff, you need a subscription. So it's so the information is really not readily available to the public, and I think that's part of the problem, and that probably needs to be addressed, if not changed.
Most
One of the problems I encounter, I teach at a community college, and one of the problems I have is I pick up a textbook, and it tells me that all air pollutants are created by trees, that they not only give off carbon dioxide, but they give off ethylene, which turns into all the other hydrocarbons that are in the air.
That's a Ronald Reagan error.
Well, but these textbooks are all throughout the
Yeah.
country distributed.
Yeah.
So you now have
Yeah.
all these people seeing it in their college textbook, and it probably gets repeated into other textbooks citing that book. This is a textbook that's used in mechanical classes all across the nation, and it's
Yeah.
wrong.
That's because you have like a group out of, I think it's Texas, where most textbooks are created, and they
Yeah.
just we talked earlier about agendas. There's your agenda. I mean, I remember in the Reagan years, him saying dead trees cause acid rain. I distinctly remember that quote.
No, our books almost quote Reagan. The other thing Reagan said, another one of his speeches, was that you could go to the Smoky Mountains and you could see the blue haze in the valleys from all the air pollution. And our books say that too.
Jesus. Well, I can't tell because I do substitute teaching for high school levels these days, and I can't tell you how many misinformation or just plain errors and mistakes are in the textbook. And I'm pointing it out to the teacher. Go, this is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. I mean, it's just chock full of errors, and it's just like, this is not good.
America's a reality-free zone. The most important thing here to remember is that in reality, there's kind of a battle, and it's the battle between scientific truth and, basically, to be blunt about it, lies. And it's heavy in climate and ecological related matters, but that's not the only thing that science is denied. And of course, some people still deny evolution, but this we like to stay on topic here, which is climate and ecology. And so we all know what the deniers, the definition. The question is how to effectively battle deniers, to win the battle and get the truth out there, and not just leave it up to a 16-year-old girl to carry all the water for it, which is pretty much what's happened.
And very unfair. But
Yeah.
she's up to the
Yeah.
task. She's just an amazing human.
Yeah.
I'm so. I mean, English is her second language, and she's so elegant, eloquent. I mean, you put her up next to our president, and it's like, oh, okay, could we trade? Maybe.
But Tim,
Please don't insult her that way.
there should have been 100 climate scientists standing next to her. I mean, they should have.
Well, Paul Beckwith is going to meet with her in
awesome
Spain. I guess Spain is where they move the climate.
I think that's the next meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a meeting. But yeah, I mean, I think Paul is a great YouTuber and a great scientist, and I really like what he does, and I'm glad that he's making the journey and trying to educate, and he's going to link up with Greta and I mean, I guess
probably interview for his channel. Hopefully,
that would be great. That would be great. I'm a big fan.
But again, guys, we talk about deniers and the facts of climate scientists. The volumes of data, and yet, you have to have this 16-year-old girl try to impress upon the public the reality of the situation. And by the way, I should mention, I have to mention this. She's got a lot, as we all know, she's got a lot of haters. And especially, I saw some stuff in Canada that was just, Canadian YouTubers who were just over the top in their methods. One of them said to Greta, well, Greta, he was with Rebel Media, and he said, Greta, why don't you go to China and tell sorry that China makes more pollution? So why don't you go to China and do your talks there? And she said, well, I would go if they would let me. And, I would, if I are invited. She says, if I'm invited, I will certainly go. And then he said, well, Greta, you can't go because it's a communist country and they won't let you. So then why did he even ask that stupid question? Which was
It's a gotcha. It's a gotcha.
And there's another YouTuber, Dr. Steve Turley, who just makes video after video after video, portraying Greta as a disturbed child, a mentally ill child, over and over and over. And of course, but the summation is that there's a battle going on here. Christine is dedicated her channel and her life. I mean, seriously, to
You're
this.
being too nice, Val.
Yes. And so is Greta. Greta has, this young girl has basically.
I love Greta. I do so much love Greta. And just because I've mentioned a few times, I think people are using her. I still have to reiterate that I know she is really sincere in doing great. I just worry people using her agenda to push their agenda, but they don't. And she's pointed that out. She's pointed it out so many times, and I just hope people see what she's pointed out.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying. She knows that people are trying to use her. She said it in her speeches.
But what I'm also saying to Jim is that the climate scientists do great and important work. In fact, this is work that is existential to human life on this planet, whether life goes on. The one failing, though, is and it's not you, because you have a YouTube channel, Jim, but is some of the other thousands of scientists who, in my opinion, have kind of dropped the ball as far as communication.
Yeah.
You got
that's a fair criticism. I'm not arguing that, but also in defense of the scientists, they're just too damn busy.
They are. But then you also have some. And I shouldn't even bring this up because this will really, this will really tee Chris off.
Oh no!
And I don't want to tee her off, but I just saw a video that Hansen made where he spent the whole video advocating nuclear power. And then we probably don't want to go into that issue right now. But what
nuclear power, no.
Well, what he was saying was things like the new reactors are much safer.
I don't fucking care. I live in a place where they're both mining the materials, the uranium, the copper, all that, and they are also storing the spent uranium. Don't fucking tell me that nuclear power is a good thing. Don't tell me that, because I get so pissed when anyone even mentions nuclear power. I don't want nothing to do with it. And with our insecure weather, our warming oceans and waters, you can't keep those reactors cool. And it's just a disaster waiting to happen. They just want to keep industry going as long as they can till the whole fucking world doesn't explode.
The nuclear industry would not exist were it not for massive government subsidies to build the damn reactors in the first place. I mean, we've had 3 sizable nuclear
Mitchell has an argument against it, I think, but we'll listen to him.
Accidents. I mean, we had 3 Mile Island, we had Chernobyl, we've had Fukushima, and how many near meltdowns or near events that we not know about that have taken place? So
Probably
I'm with
many,
Chris
because
on that.
they don't report all those oil
I knew I
spills
They
on
don't.
that. But
So-
okay,
Okay.
let's
Let's,
let the devil's advocate come aboard. Mitchell, what is your argument pro nuclear?
You guys are talking about fission reactors. Every instance you mention is
Yeah.
a fission reactor. Even the thorium reactors are fission reactors.
Right.
However, there is nuclear waste. And I've made power sources using nuclear waste. So we're already burdened with it. The only thing we can do is use it and take it to a safer state.
Which is
And
usually
these things-
Utah because it's dry.
No.
So-
A safer state as meaning take it so it decays to a safer element.
Yeah.
Yes,
I think
I
that's where
agree.
you were going. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there are devices called radioisotope decay generators. The entire planet is basically one big radioisotope decay generator. Majority of our heat does not come from the sun. It comes from the radioactive isotope decay in the center of our planet. We are actually, if we were going by judging by our distance from the sun and the brightness of our sun as the source of our heat, we are not in the Goldilocks zone. We calculated it, not realizing how much heat we get from
Can
alpha
you repeat that
decay.
one more time, Mitchell? That very last sentence about the Goldilocks zone.
Oh, sure. The Goldilocks zone is where we theorize that because we were here and we're this distance from the sun, that we're getting our heat from the sun. And that's what keeps us going. And at that time, they didn't realize that most of the planet's heat comes from alpha decay. And alpha decay is the most common reaction. When you use alpha decay, in fact, alpha decay is how we powered the Voyager and the Pioneer spacecraft. We have so little of the high producing stuff that when Cheney had a special law made so that the remaining high reactive alpha would be left for Cheney in case he needed an artificial heart to power his heart. I'm not making that one up. I'm not making. I think it was actually for his pacemaker. Normally, a pacemaker needs to be changed out every 5 years or so.
Okay,
This pacemaker would have lasted his lifetime, and it meant that we had to not go ahead with one space flight.
okay. Well, I thought where you were going with this was fusion reactors.
I don't really see fusion as viable in the time that we need a power source.
No,
So, but
it's 25 years out. They've been saying that for 50 years.
Yeah, Russia's most common power source up until the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union was radioisotope decay generators, run off of the nuclear waste from their reactors. So when they went down,
so you're saying basically getting nuclear waste and then using the decay, which is decaying into particles.
Probably eventually lead, right?
well, that's lead is many billions of years.
But that's the ultimate end product of it all.
Well, why don't you explain that a little bit? That how you're going to take spent fuel and use the decay to make energy.
Because
Well,
it's giving off heat, and the
And it
heat
gives
can
off
be
heat for a
reclaimed.
So we launched Voyager. Okay. We launched the Voyager in the
in
mid
the 70s.
Yeah.
In fact, Voyager 2
is-
just left the solar system.
Right. It's the fastest moving object there is from that was man-made. It's now at, I can't remember what portion of its power, but I believe it had power for 127 years. But it's at only a small portion of what it was putting out when it first left.
So Mitchell, do you know? Is there any way to accelerate the decay of some of these elements?
I couldn't discuss that.
No.
But so anyway, with the alpha decay at the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, 9,000 radioisotope decay generators were in use in Siberia to power monitoring and weather stations. other
What-
than people
what size-
accessing it,
What size fuel is the fuel would you estimate roughly?
we're talking about
Like a
total
softball size?
device less than the size of a beach ball.
Okay, like a beach, but the fuel itself would be even smaller than that.
About a softball.
Yeah, a softball inside of a beach ball.
And then you have basically at the time they did it, they would have used thermocouples. Nowadays we have other devices that we can use to transfer the heat.
Wouldn't this radioactive decay be giving off a hell of a lot of radiation?
The Russians didn't purify. They actually used really nasty stuff. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, there wasn't anybody left to tell them. People were cracking them open and using them instead of campfires.
Okay, kind of a non sequitur here. There was a case in Mexico where people went into a rubbish yard and took old X-ray equipment. Some of it was chemotherapy equipment, and these people got exposed by this really radioactive
Iodine.
and
well, actually, it was cobalt.
yeah, it was cobalt. I think it was cobalt.
That's nasty.
The city that is most impacted by it is by Ciudad Juarez, and
So you're
they made
familiar with that
rebar.
case?
They made rebar for their streets from it, and there's all these nice houses out there that you just can't go to, and now because of that, every scrapyard in the United States has a radiation detector.
Okay, so what
First thing to do is
so what you're talking about here is creating small nuclear generators.
yes, but these
Very
are generators that are using stuff that is there now. They're not
And
stuff that they're
how
stuff that
much-
we're already stuck with.
How much of that stuff is there, do you think?
Many tons, many hundreds of tons.
Many hundreds of thousands of tons.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, a
So
lot.
Mitchell, if
Yes.
I can jump in here. So are you saying that that would be a potential solution for the already nuclear waste that exists, is to take that material and further use it?
Yeah, take a look at an accident we had a few years ago. I'm looking for the right Google words to pass up to you. The waste isolation pilot, the waste isolation pilot project called the WIPP. The really high grade stuff is so hot for so many years that they came up with the idea to pack it in kitty litter.
Yeah.
Basically, they
This is
said
my favorite story.
they wanted to put it in kitty litter that was made of clay, but somebody else decided that kitty litter that comes from clay is more expensive than the kitty litter that comes from ground
cellulose.
paper. So they packed
Nitric
it all
acid is the solvent, right? Nitric acid, cellulose, nitrocellulose. Ring any bells?
They put it in a cavern under New Mexico, and they packed them too close together, so they actually started heating each other. Basically, they made a low-grade nuclear reactor out of it.
Oops.
And it got hot, caught fire, and then it released a cloud of plutonium that we probably should have permanently evacuated Dallas, Houston.
Yeah, it went
and other areas.
clear across Texas. And it wasn't a nuclear reaction, it was a chemical reaction between
Well,
the
what
nitric
happened
acid
was-
solvent and
What
the
happened, though,
cellulose.
It took material that was nuclear, and
And
it
Exploded.
Hey guys,
Well,
don't forget
yeah,
to
but
read the comments once in a while and answer questions.
We are.
Okay, okay.
it
For those that
vaporized it, and once it was aerosolized, that air went across the country, went across
Because
the
their
state.
filtration systems didn't work. This was supposed to be keeping the waste isolated in a salt dome for 10,000 years. And after 10 years, it failed.
it fucked up.
Right.
It screwed the pooch.
Yeah.
So
And
each,
Los Alamos is still sending the drums. They're just putting them in open pits in low rent areas of Texas. This is true.
But what happens is we constantly have this problem, and it's one of the reasons why I'm against thorium reactors. Is that I feel that too often it gets specified as safe, and all these little cost cuts down the road where people don't realize the mistakes they're making. So what starts out sounding like, oh yeah, we've got a good working system, gets compromised by all of the cost savings. And I've seen instances where your boss gets what you say, strikes out something you say, and puts his report up. And by the time it's filtered up to the people who make the big money decision, make the big mistake, we almost had to evacuate Chicago.
Good luck with that.
Well, obviously, there's that solution is a bit problematic because due to the small size, there are some deranged people who don't have a gun might use it to blow it up in a crowd. You know, it's got some problems to it.
Okay, guys, read comments. Damn it.
Okay.
I'm taking a break. You guys are. It's
Okay,
past
I
my
got one.
bedtime, and I didn't sleep last night, so you guys got to take this over.
Well,
I got one. Void. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just want to read one from Void Yang twice. We can change the decay rate of radiation with our minds. It's not really random, but it's really rather Randy-ohm.
Yeah, it's really spooky.
It is spooky.
When you've got a radiation detector, and we had 6 curies of americium-241, and basically you hear a shh, and then all of a sudden there are times when all of it stops. It's just like all of them stop, just for like a half a second or a quarter of a second, but it seems like forever when it happens. So you're hearing shh, shh. So yeah, it's not truly random, and we don't have a complete understanding of. Well,
Okay.
we were,
okay. Well, now, what were you just talking about quantum physics, like quantum entanglement or something?
not really,
Getting at?
but when we start getting down into what's happening below the atom, we know now that there's not just isotope, but there are meta isotopes where extra energy is stored in the system. And so we have this other time where things go to meta states. We didn't even talk about that when I was in high school. I don't even remember that being a public knowledge at the time I was in high school. So the average person does not even have the background to discuss radiation, because even in a factory where we had the largest americium-241 source in the world, we didn't have that many people trained to actually understand what was going on.
Well, that's even the case in a hospital, where people really don't have a clue about radiation therapy. And I want to mention something else, and we can get back to that on a future show. It's there's supposedly a new revolution in science that's too complicated to get into now. And I mentioned it to Jim. It was concerning Donald Hoffman. And there's some possibility that he's saying that the last 300 years of space-time and materialism may be rewritten soon. Now, I know that comes quite a shock to you, Jim, and to you, you Osama and Mitchell, right? What I just said, right?
Yeah, I threw a wrench into a physics candidate doctoral candidate the other day.
Well, yeah, I'm not gonna get into it tonight because it's so outrageous. I can see Jim smiling. Like, what did he just say?
I was, I was just like,
That-
what?
That
I know. What
you're
did you
going-
just say? Okay, seriously, you got to start reading some comments. I can't stay up. I'm like
I'm kind
trying
of
to pitch
blurry.
my eyes open because I was
Yeah,
sleep. I
I'm
didn't.
kind of
No,
blurry
I
here.
got no sleep last night, and there's great comments just going up the board,
Okay,
and no one's addressing them.
What's the gist?
Yeah.
What's the gist of it then? You were just there.
Okay, well, Andre had a question, or not a comment about the bottom line is y'all benefiting from the current energy that is produced, and until someone comes up with a better power source, it will not change. And that pisses me off. I love you, Andre. I do. I love Andre. But it pisses me off because people never consider that they can live with less, like less power, less
Fuck is it?
like if it was taken away from me today, I didn't have this internet and I didn't have lights and I didn't have to fucking go to work every day, I would be so fucking happy to just
She's not
deal with. But
joking.
I don't know. I know not everyone is in the situation I'm in where I can build a fire and keep warm and build an outhouse and be fine that way and stuff.
Ride a horse.
Because yeah, I have a horse to ride. Um, not everyone's in that scenario. I realize that, but that's because there's too fucking many people on the planet.
Too
God.
damn many people.
Ah, okay, Chris, let me jump in here with a shameless plug.
Okay.
Look for a video that I'll be posting soon that I'll be discussing carrying capacity.
Right, carrying
And
capacity of the planet.
and specifically related to number of people on the planet.
Right, because
That's going to be on my channel soon.
awesome. Okay,
What-
so everyone look for that on Science Talk with Jim Massa. But one thing I want to really, really reiterate to people is, okay, yeah, if we got rid of every single animal on the planet, we may have enough room to grow our crops for a growing population, but we can't survive without those other species. We depend on those other species, and we're not only over the carrying capacity for our habitat, we are intruding on all other habitats of every other animal on this planet that we also depend on to survive ourselves. I'm driving up and down the roads every day and seeing all the animals that are hit by freaking cars because we are cutting off their habitat. We are invading on their habitat. We are in overshoot, not only of our own habitat, but of all other species' habitat. And that pisses me off so bad. I don't know how to deal with it. I really
Yeah, when we
okay.
Highly.
talk about
Highly
China and
No.
pollution,
Well, China's bad, but our state is just as bad as fucking China in the winter. It's horrible.
when we talk about China and pollution, we really have to bring up the fact that although they are a big polluter, they
But
bought
they're
us 80
less per
years.
capita than we are.
They bought us 80 years by going to the single child. And that was
Right.
very tough for them
I
to do.
agree.
Right.
And we need to be
Yes.
thanking them every time we see
I
somebody
do.
from China that what they bought us, we would be
It
dead
was a
already if it
horrible
wasn't for
thing,
China.
though. It was a horrible
No,
thing.
it wasn't.
No, I mean, it was a horrible thing for people to deal with. I'm not saying it was a horrible
No, it
thing
wasn't.
for the planet because the planet is actually more important than the individual people.
The Chinese did fine with that.
No.
Yeah, I
Oh
don't
my God!
don't
Have
think
you
it
ever
was
seen Sophie's Choice? Oh,
What about it?
that was. I don't know. Anyway,
That's the
Well,
whole
or
problem.
anyway.
Joy Luck Club, and they
Yeah.
go into throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where that all came from. Oh my God, it was
Oh.
horrible.
Yeah, but if
I hate that shit, but the reality is we're overpopulated. That's the
Right.
reality.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
So
Finish
if
your
the
point.
Chinese
I'm
hadn't
sorry.
done that, we would have been swarming in people, all
Swarming in Chinese
burning
Hell
whatever they
yeah.
could every day.
You think there's a lot of Asian buffets now? Imagine if they didn't do that.
I
We'd
like
have
Asian buffets.
10
They're
times
fun.
the amount of Asian buffets.
Ah,
A huge amount.
Mr.
Yeah, Friday I
Oh,
get to
we have
go.
a new viewer, Mr. Happy. Thank you so much. I am overreacting.
Okay.
Really? You think I'm overreacting, though? Am
Somebody
I
else had a
overreacting?
question.
Our planet is dying because there's too many people on here. We're in overshoot, and we're overshooting all the other habitat for other species, and I'm overreacting. We're killing our planet, and I'm overreacting.
Mom
Yeah.
Earth is not happy.
Splitting an atom is not the same as making an atom bomb. Atoms are splitting all the time, all around you. There are 3 isotopes, main isotopes of oxygen, and some of them decay. When you're breathing in and breathing out, carbon dioxide. Some of the carbon
Hey,
is carbon
mods, watch
14.
Mr. Happy. I'm not really happy with. I mean,
Oh.
not too bad so far, but going much further than that, and I'm done with Mr. Happy. So yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
so the problem is, I teach robots.
Uh,
Okay, you teach robots. Cool. Okay, so you do AI.
Well, no,
or
Dana
what?
said something about robots, and I was
Oh.
going to say I teach robots.
Okay.
But
You teach
we
about
have this.
robots, or you teach the robots themselves?
I teach students to program robots.
Oh,
yeah, I
cool.
think he was making a joke.
But
No, just watch him.
there are
And
so many.
Torstein, please tell me if you're doing an after show.
There are so many facets of what's going on around us. Back to the thing we said earlier, this needs to be taught in high school. That people are making decisions,
Okay, he is.
jumping to conclusions when they don't even understand it. Somebody earlier in there said you can't split an atom. Not only can you split an atom, you can split an electron. You can split a neutron. You can split a proton. Those are called hadrons. So, we can force a field and create parts of a hadron. Those are things we know that we can do now. And those are parts of the things that happen with radiation.
You can split an atom in a big way, and it's called an atomic bomb.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody, quick
they're currently
announcement.
popping are all around us.
When we're done here, Going South channel is having an after show. Just quick announcement. Directly
Where's
after
that?
this show, go right to Going South, and he will
put
be
a link
having
in the chat.
Yeah, do you have it all the stream all set up? He's teaching escort dolls. Jeez, Torstein.
I just want to jump into something Mitchell just said, and what they're not teaching in high school. The problem is when you look at the changing high school curriculum across the nation, they're not requiring much of students. They're only requiring like 2 units of science, and geez, the way it's being taught is just appalling.
Bye,
and the fact there's only 2 units of science is just wrong.
Appalling is being kind.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anyway,
there's a link now in the chat for Going South for the after show.
Yeah.
So we're way over.
We are going to have some big news coming up soon.
Yes, we actually will be having. I don't know what your news is, but I know we're gonna have really good news coming up soon.
Coming soon.
Super excited. I think Jim Moss is gonna be a part of. Well,
yes.
I don't know what you're talking, but yeah, we have a big thing, a big network of channels gonna be getting together. We're working on it.
So YouTube kicks us off
until it's done. But we're acquiring a list of channels of great people, and we're going to be all working together and collaborating on a network. Actually, Torstein from Going South is doing this, but we're working behind the scenes to try to make this all work out for a 24-hour climate channel, environmental destruction channel that we can all collaborate on. So super excited. Hopefully I didn't piss you off, but I'm super excited, Torstein. It's like we're keeping it silent while we're working on how to organize it behind the scenes. And in the meantime, we're going to support each other's channels. And when we know the schedule of somebody else, we're going to let them know, when their show is going to be on, and keep people coming to these channels and build up our family, our community. And so really, really excited. Torstein, I thank you so much for trying to get this all put together. It's going to be a lot of work, and we're going to help you as much as we can. So
power to the people. And defeat is
Yes.
not in our vocabulary.
Okay. All right, you guys, definitely. Jim, I'm so excited you came on tonight. That was a
Thanks,
thrill.
Jim.
I appreciate you guys inviting me.
You have
Osama,
the best voice. Oh, you really have a good voice for this. Osama, God, I missed having you on. I was so happy to have you on again. Thank you
So good to be
so
on.
much. And Mitchell,
I love you so much.
I love you too so much. And Mitchell, you're awesome every time. And Val, I love you because you're on every week with me, but I love you. Um, this is the best panel I think I've ever had. So thank you guys so much. Thank all you guys. Andre, thanks for coming. Torstein, Tanya. Don't forget Going South channel. He posted it in the chat. Um, he's going to have an after show. So I can watch it. We need to go. Tanya,
Thumb it up,
everybody,
folks.
Bazaar, yeah.
Thumb it up.
coming up.
Everybody, love y'all. Yeah, give thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, for Christ's sake. I'm losing subscribers all the time. There's no one's getting notifications. I know I'm not to some of the channels I watch. I just barely received Jim Moss's notification after months and months. I subscribed to him and didn't see one notification until today. And
I'll
thank
be
God I did.
subscribing to him tonight.
Yes, you better. Let's see his numbers jump up. He deserves.
I already did.
Yay,
Put a
good.
link in. Put the link in the chat.
I think you just
I did.
put a
I'll
comment.
do it again.
Put a comment.
Oh, now I see it.
Jim, and then they can click on. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
FrozenEarth.tv.
No, that's
Yep.
that's Going South, isn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, not Going South.
No, science. What is it?
Is it
Science
Science
Talk
by
with
Jim?
Jim Massa. Anyway, yeah, keep bringing people. Jim Massa, this is somebody who really deserves to have an audience. So please go to his channel and subscribe and follow him. Click the bell and like as you go in. That's always what I do with the people I trust. I like it before I even watch the video. And you can always go back and unlike it if you don't like it, right? So why not just start out with a like? I don't know.
There you go.
I don't know, right? Okay, guys, say goodbye to everybody, and we're gonna click it out of here. You guys can stay for a sec if you want, but say goodbye.
It's been fun, guys.
Say bye, Mitchell. So good having you guys. Bye, guys.
So
good
nice
talking with
to
good
talk
talking with
you.
everyone.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it again.
Cool.
Exemplary
Cheers.
group.
Yeah,
I love you all.
there you go.
I'll,
So cool.
if I can throw a last thought out there.
Sure, yes.
In the institution where I used to work at, there was a sign there in the lobby, and the sign said, "A good planet is hard to find."
Love it. We'll end it with there. Thank you so
Let
much.
alone 16 of them.
No joke. Have a good night, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
you rock.
Thanks,
You
Chris.
rock.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.